Advocacy Network Against Killings in the Philippines. ANAK was organized in 2017 during the height of the extrajudicial killings in the Philippines. So, as Filipinos living in Thailand, we thought that we needed to do something to be able to help address the situation in the Philippines. So, last year we held an event called Dying Democracy. That's the EJ case in the Philippines. So we invited the mother of the EJ case victim. We had a big event at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. And then so we thought we would be organizing a series of small events that are related to the current issues in the Philippines. So we thought the first one would be on train and the overall economic situation in the Philippines and its impact on OFWs around the world. This will just be the first. We will be announcing the second one soon, hopefully around the blatant mockery of the Constitution yesterday. So we hope to do that soon, inviting CJ Sereno herself. So welcome. I'll turn you over now to Akoy, who will introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. So our speaker for this afternoon is a PhD student, PhD candidate, and teaching fellow at the University of the Philippines, where he graduated BA Economics summa cum laude and MA Economics as well. So he worked in different government and international organizations like the Securities and Exchange Commission of the Philippines and World Bank Office in Manila, as well as the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, in the Philippines. He also regularly writes economic op-ed pieces for Rockver.com. So our speaker for this afternoon is JC Putumbayan.
Thank you, Sir Adoy. Thank you, everyone. It's nice to see so many Filipinos in this corner of the world. Okay. So, first of all, I would like to thank Sir Adoy for inviting me, ANAK for inviting me, and for you coming here today, despite it being a nice Saturday, to be doing something else. Pero I think for some of us, it's important that it gives us some benefit to actually discuss pertinent issues that affect Filipinos, not just in the Philippines, but across the world. So I hope you find this worthwhile. Okay, so today I'm tasked to discuss economics. Okay, so first of all, I would like to ask kung sino sa inyo may background in economics beforehand. I mean, just even an introductory course, back in high school, syempre, required sa high school, di ba? And then sa college, okay? So at least some of you, okay? So that's nice. In any case, even if you don't have any training in economics, I will give you a crash course about basic economics, just so we have a common understanding of the terms, the concepts. Okay, don't worry if you don't have, you think you don't have enough econ. Okay, so the title of my talk is The Impact of Duterte's Economic Policies on OFWs and Their Families. Okay. A few weeks ago, I was also invited to talk in UP at the College of Arts and Letters about economic discourse. Okay, in other words, the way we talk about economics. Okay, about the economic issues of our day. And one of the things that came out of that is that we're not talking about economics enough. Okay, even if economics is really quite important in our daily lives, okay, especially now that there are so many economic policies of the Duterte administration, we have to have a good understanding of these policies and their impact on the economy and on our lives. After all, economics is about the study of people's behavior. Okay. So we have, as citizens of the Philippines, we have to talk about these issues a lot. Okay, and this event is one of those things that I hope will contribute to that. Okay, so just as a brief outline, okay, oops. Medyo touchy itong si HDMI. Ayan, okay. So, just as a brief outline, okay, so I'll be talking about these 4 points. So, first of all, I'll give an overview of the economic situation in the Philippines as much as I could, okay? And then, we'll zero in on Duterte's economic policies in particular, okay? From the small economic policies up to the very large policies like train and build, okay? At tungkol saan ba yun and how will it affect us? And then, it might be of interest to you, ano yung impact ng mga policies na yun for OFWs and even people, I mean, even if you're not an OFW, okay, how will it affect Filipinos all over the globe, okay, not just in the Philippines. Okay, so merong ramifications even for those of us living abroad. And then, I'll conclude with a note about, does Duterte really care about OFWs? Okay? You'd think na, doon sa intro slide ko, by the way, ito yung last year, dumating si Duterte sa Bangkok. Tapos, ayan yung sumalubong sa kanya. Okay?
Wala tayo siya.
Sorry, English. Okay. So, when Duterte came here in Bangkok last year, okay, this is the crowd that greeted him. So, hundreds of adoring fans, okay, there. He's like a god, right here. Okay, so, given the influence that he has, okay, he has influenced so many Filipinos that he has power to make important policies that people will readily accept. So we have to understand all of these policies in detail, okay? Okay, so let's start with this. Okay, another picture from last year's event. President Duterte said, ang dream ko sa Pilipinas, hindi ko na maabot yan, pero sisimulan ko. In 10 years, hindi na kayo lalabas ng bansa. Okay, so his vision is that Filipinos won't have to go abroad to find decent work, okay, and earn lots of income for their families, okay? And even if he won't see that, at least he wants to start it, okay? Napapaganda siya. Okay. So there, I mean, in everything that President Duterte says, we have to make a distinction between what he says and what he actually does. Okay. It's not necessarily the same. Okay. So we have to be mindful of that at all times. Okay, so let's start with a general overview of the economic situation in the Philippines. Okay, and to do that, I'll start with a number of terms that you may have encountered before that we need to be able to understand these recent developments. So number one, okay, kita, okay, incomes, okay. In economics, how do we talk about incomes? And usually we talk about GDP. What is GDP again? For those gross domestic product, and it is really just, okay, the total value of all goods and services produced in an economy. Okay, whether you are Filipino or not, okay, your output is included in GDP. Okay, and when you want to ask how fast are Filipinos incomes rising, you look at the GDP growth rate. Okay, how fast? So there's an economic pie, and how fast is that pie growing? Okay, that's GDP growth. Another is presyo. Okay, price. Okay, so for example, if you want to ask how fast are prices rising, you have to look at the inflation rate. Okay. So the inflation rate really just measures how fast prices are changing, whether up or down. Okay? So if you can imagine a car, okay? A car moves forward and yung velocity ng car na yun yung inflation rate. Okay? And when, for example, the car is accelerating, umaarangkada yung kotse, then that means the inflation rate is becoming higher. Okay? The speed is becoming higher and higher. Okay? The car is becoming faster and faster. Okay? Trabaho, okay? How many Filipinos don't have jobs? Now, the actual definition of the Philippines, official economic statistics are collected by the Philippine Statistics Authority, PSA, if you don't know yet. And the PSA defines unemployment as not just the state of not having a job, but also you have to be available to have a job, and you're actually finding work. Okay, so that's the precise definition of unemployment, and we'll look at the data as well. Now, Professor Shell Habito, okay, of Ateneo, has likes to call these three key economic indicators as presyo, trabaho, and kita, or otherwise known as the PITIC test. Okay, so it's actually a good way of summing up the important economic variables that matter to most Filipinos. Okay, so throughout my talk, I'll be showing you a number of statistics. Okay, and when we're talking about economics, hindi kasi hindi tayo gagamit ng statistics. We have to use statistics. If only as a useful way of showing what's happening on the ground. Okay, so crash course again on how to read a graph. Okay, so usually there are two axes right here. This one happens to be about years, from 1950 to 2016, and the vertical would be the Philippine GDP, okay? How large it is in billions of pesos. And if you notice, so GDP is orange, okay? And then I marked there when the Duterte administration started, okay? Now, what do you notice? I want this to be as interactive as possible. What do you notice? Anyone? Over time, what's happening to GDP? It goes up and up. Okay, so in other words, the economic pie, okay, the total incomes of all Filipinos or everyone in the Philippines is increasing over time from 1950 up to the present time. But note that there's a distinction between GDP and GNI. Okay, GNI is another concept, but this includes the output of all Filipinos regardless of where you are. Okay? So in other words, kung ikaw ay nasa labas ng bansa, okay, hindi part ng GDP yung kinikita mo. Part siya ng GNI, Gross National Income. So in other words, GDP, kasama dyan lahat ng output ng nasa Pilipinas, whether Filipino ka or foreigner, nandun yun sa GDP. Pero yung mga OFWs, hindi kasama kita nila sa GDP, nasa GNI yun. Okay? And sa GNI, tinatanggal natin yung output ng mga foreigners sa bansa. Okay? Pero dinadagdag natin yung kita ng mga Pilipino. As long as Pilipino ka, yung output mo kasama sa GNI. And if you notice, from 1950 to 1990, more or less, magkahawig yung trend ng GDP and GNI. But if you notice, after 1990, biglang merong diversion. Okay? Sorry. I keep forgetting. So, if you notice, from 1950 to 1990, okay, the trends between GDP and GNI seem to be similar or alike. But after 1990, there seems to have been a divergence. Which is larger now? GDP or GNI? GNI, okay? Because of Filipinos working abroad, okay? So, including OFWs, they send so much, they earn so much money, okay, that they remit to their families, okay, to the extent that GDP is now so much lower than GNI. Okay, so the gap between GDP and GNI gives you an indication of the importance of the contributions of Filipinos working abroad, okay? And to the extent that GNI allows your families back at home to buy food, clothing, education, etc., then it only underscores the fact that Filipinos working abroad really made a difference back at home. Okay? So notice that, I mean, for every graph, there's so many things you can actually, every graph tells a story, okay? If you only look hard enough, it will actually tell you lots of things. So for example, there are some who claim that because of President Duterte, the economy is doing very well. Okay? Is it because of President Duterte? Or is it the fact that it has always been getting better even without Duterte? So in other words, the good economic performance we see right now is because of this momentum right here. Okay? The boom in the economy has started way before President Duterte's time. So you cannot attribute good economic conditions right now to President Duterte alone. Okay? Now, this one shows you the levels of GDP. What about the growth rate? Okay, so the growth rate just captures the difference year per year. Okay? We want the growth rate to be as high as possible. So this next graph here shows you the GDP growth rate per quarter. So GDP is measured per quarter. And if you notice, so we begin at around the 1980s. and this one is 0. So 0, positive, and then negative. What can you notice? What's this? What happened right here? Why did, in other words, if it is below 0, the economy, instead of becoming larger, it actually became smaller. Okay? What happened right here? Around the time of the EDSA Revolution 1986. But note that it started even before that. So 1983, 1984, 1985. Okay? So even before the EDSA Revolution, the economy has really deteriorated a lot. Okay? To the point that the economy became smaller by around 10% for a number of consecutive quarters. Okay? So there was lots of political turmoil. The economy was in a bad shape. Okay? So the economy really contracted here. But notice that ever since, the economy has actually been faring pretty well, okay? And it has in fact recovered to the point that after the Asian financial crisis, so there's also a dip here, we have never again experienced a contraction of the economy since the Asian financial crisis of 1997, 1998. Okay, so in fact, the economic growth right now is pretty high, but consistently high. And actually, the latest GDP growth figure was published last Thursday lang. And it came out at 6.8%. So the economy is growing very fast, okay? But again, notice that it's not because of President Duterte per se, okay, again, I mark it right here, but because it is an improvement. Okay, there's a momentum that has started way before President Duterte's time. Okay, now this one shows you, so even if the economy is doing pretty well right now, we could actually be doing a lot better, okay? So this one is a statistical analysis that I made with one of my PhD classmates, a professor at the UP School of Statistics. And this one shows you, okay, so this one is GDP per capita. So this is different from GDP because GDP per capita means GDP per person. In other words, what is every Filipino's share in the total economic pie? If you cut up GDP across all 100 million Filipinos, how much will each Filipino get? Okay? Back in the 1960, it's less than $5,000 okay, per year. But now it's about that. Pero, okay, we can actually be doing a lot better. Okay, so we did some statistical analysis and we asked the question, what if we just copy the growth rates of our neighbors, okay, including Thailand, okay, Indonesia, what else? Malaysia, okay? So those countries, our neighboring countries, did not experience the same political turmoil around these decades, especially those martial law years. So if we just copy the growth rates of our neighbors, okay, and apply that to our original income here, nasa tayo ngayon? What would our income now be like, okay? So one of our estimates shows that by 2014, the average income of Filipinos should actually be around 4 times more than their current incomes. Okay? If we had just copied the growth rates of our neighbors, including Thailand. Okay? Now, we did a number of other assumptions, okay? And we came up with 3 times more. Okay? So in other words, if your annual income is if your monthly income is 100,000, it should actually be around 300,000 or 400,000 pesos. Okay? Now this yellow one here shows you the worst case scenario. So for every year since 1960, pick out the worst performer among Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia, and then apply that growth rate to the Philippines, and then that's the worst case for every year. And it turns out that the actual incomes of Filipinos is actually even lower than the worst case scenario if you apply the growth rates of the worst neighbor every year. Okay? So we're actually doing far worse than the worst case scenario relative to our neighbors. Okay? Which is a sobering thought. Now if you extract this blue line here, okay, and apply that to the actual GDP per capita across the ASEAN countries, so this one, the dashed line, shows you the high potential or hypothetical incomes of Filipinos. The solid orange one shows you the actual. Again, this is a very illustrative graph. It shows you that Okay, around the 1960s, actually, we were actually richer than Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. Okay? If you follow it, yung Philippines, the orange one is higher than these three other blue trends. But this graph shows you in what year our neighbors actually surpassed us. So, for example, Malaysia, okay, which is the richest right now per person, actually became richer than us back in the 1960s pa. Okay? Whereas Thailand, okay, beat us, became richer than the Filipinos back in around the early 1980s. Even Indonesia, okay, is now became richer than Filipinos, okay, around the 1990s. Okay, so naungusan na nila tayo dati pa. Okay? Now note that if again applying the data from the previous graph to this one, okay, actually dapat mas mayaman tayo ngayon kaysa sa lahat sa kanila. We should be richer now than our neighbors, okay? If we had just experienced the same growth rates as them, okay? Now this one is another comparison between the average incomes between Filipinos and the Japanese. Okay, so before, okay, in the 1960s, they say that the Philippines is just second to Japan in terms of prosperity, and that is actually borne by the data. Okay, so there, we're quite similar to the incomes of the Japanese back in the 1950s. But look how we have diverged since then. Okay. So right now, okay, there's Japan and the Philippines is still right here, okay? Now, some of the economic managers of President Duterte claim that the Philippines could actually be an upper middle income country in the next few years, okay? Now, looking at the data, how likely is that, okay? Now, I extracted data from the World Bank, this blue line here, showing you the average income per Filipino, okay? And income classifications are done by the World Bank. There is a threshold. If you exceed that threshold, then you are considered an upper middle income country. And that happens to be around $4,000 okay, per person. Now, look here. So we're actually quite close to the threshold. So it's not far-fetched to say that the Philippines will be an upper middle income country very soon in the next 4 or 5 years. Okay, so there's some grain of truth to that. Okay, so we just have to grow to maintain our current course, and then we'll reach that quite soon. But again, note that it's not because of Duterte, but because it is a continuation of the improvement of the Philippine economy since the 1990s. Okay. Okay, so out of GNI, gross national income, some part of thank you, sir. So some part of gross national income comes from OFWs, okay, overseas Filipino workers, and this one shows you that as of 2017, the total amount of OFW remittances reached $28 billion, okay, and that has been almost continuously increasing since the 1990s, okay. But then, if you compute the growth rates, okay, the growth rates of OFW remittances has been going down, okay? So in other words, in fact, in the Asian financial crisis, the total size of all OFW remittances actually shrank, okay? Understandably, because of the Asian financial crisis. It has increased since then, and now it has gone down again. Now, I computed, on my way here, on the plane, I computed the share of all OFW remittances in Asia in particular to total OFW remittances, and that turned out to be 18%. So 18.8% of all OFW remittances came from Asia, okay? But the share of Thailand, okay, of Filipinos in Thailand is about 1% of all Asian remittances. Okay, so I mean, relative to other ASEAN countries, there's a small population kasi of Filipinos here.
When you say Asian countries, you mean ASEAN only, right?
not just ASEAN, Asia as a whole. Yeah. So
geographic from the Middle East.
yes, yeah. Because the Philippine Statistics Authority has data on the origin of all OFW remittances. So out of all, yeah, the share of Asia in general. Yeah. Now, so that's income. Okay. So as a recap, so the economy is doing quite well in terms of incomes, but we could be doing better. Okay. Now let's go to prices. So prices is important because it affects everyone. Okay. How high or low prices are affects what you can buy and what you cannot buy. Okay, given your income. Now this one shows you the inflation rate of in the Philippines. Okay, from 2013 up to the present. Now. I want you to focus first on the orange one. Okay, so that one is the original trend. Okay, so as of what month is this? April. Okay, the inflation rate is 5.1%. Okay, now the thing with inflation is that how do you know that it's high or too low? Okay. Now we say inflation is too high or too low relative to the target of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or the central bank. Okay. Now the main policy of the central bank is to target inflation. Okay. It tells us what's the acceptable level of inflation rate at any given point in time. So from 2015 up to the present, it turns out that the target of the Bangko Sentral is 3%. Okay, so it should be around 3% and not too high or too low relative to 3%. In fact, the Bangko Central's target is 3% plus or minus 1 percentage point. So in other words, between 2% and 4%. Okay, that's the band around which the inflation rate should stay. But notice that since January, the inflation rate has actually been higher than the Bangko Central's target. So in other words, we have already exceeded the acceptable level of inflation as set by the central bank. Okay. Now, notice that, so this dashed line here shows you when President Duterte came into power, okay? And if you look at the orange line, it shows you that when President Duterte started, we were just at the bottom of the inflation target of 2%, okay? But right now, we have already traversed this band and actually exceeded it to the point that it's already 5.1%. So we're, in other words, we're above the target already, okay? In other words, prices in the Philippines right now are rising faster than what the Bangko Sentral set for itself. Now, the black line shows you an alternative computation because the inflation rate, by the way, is dependent on a so-called base year. Okay? So in other words, the inflation rate at any given point in time is based on a certain reference year. Now the orange line shows you the inflation rate with base year 2006. But every 6 years, okay, the inflation figures are rebased. They are rebased every 6 years, okay? And then right now the prevailing base year is 2012. And notice that because of the rebasing, all official inflation figures are now lower than the orange line. So the black line, in other words, is lower than the orange line. So that's good for the economic managers because, for example, they can now quote a low. So instead of saying inflation is 5.1, they can say that it is 4.5. When in fact, if you follow the original trend, it's now around 5.1%. Okay? Now, the inflation rate, there's no one inflation rate. Okay? The inflation rate can actually apply differently to different types of people based on their income. So, for example, the inflation rate felt by the poorest Filipinos. For example, this graph here shows you the blue trend here shows you the inflation rate for the poorest 30% of Filipinos. Because the poor do not consume the same products as the average Filipino. Because, for example, the share of food. What do you think is the share of food consumed by the poor versus the average Filipino? Is it smaller or larger? The share of food as a group of commodities they consume. As a percent of their income, do they consume more or less food? do you think?
More.
Food. They consume more, okay? In fact, around 2/3 of the incomes of the poor are actually spent on food alone, okay? And in fact, rice in particular occupies already 1/3 of their incomes, okay? So whenever the price of rice increases a lot, it affects the poor the most, okay? They are hurt the most by changes in the prices of rice, the price of rice. So if you remember, there was a mini rice crisis back in 2014 because of the botched rice policies of Proceso Alcala, the Agriculture Secretary. And that resulted in shortages of NFA rice. NFA rice is subsidized rice. The NFA, or National Food Authority, buys rice at a high price and sells it to the poor at a low price. Okay, so in other words, it subsidizes the price of rice. But because there's no more NFA rice left, okay, the poor are left to consume commercial rice, which is pricier, okay? And that means that, and insofar as their income, 1/3 of their income goes to rice alone, okay? So even a small change in the price of rice affects them a lot, okay? Hurts them a lot. So the inflation rate felt by the poor is actually so much higher than the inflation rate felt by the average Filipino. And if you notice, the latest figures show that, again, the inflation rate felt by the poor is 5.3% as of last quarter, which is higher than the average inflation rate felt by the average Filipino. Okay, so we have to, in other words, we have to watch out for the inflation rate for different segments of society because we're not the same in terms of socioeconomic background. Now, jobs. So there are two ways of looking at the job scenario in the Philippines. So again, we began with the unemployment rate, which is this lower trend here. So if you are without work, you are available to work and looking for work, you are considered unemployed. Okay? And that turns out to be 5.3% of all working Filipinos. Okay? Now, if you notice, this is, there are ups and downs, but this one is a decreasing trend. So over time, since 2005, the unemployment rate has been going down steadily. Okay, if you remove the ups and downs. Okay. Now, the same story goes for the underemployment rate. Now, the underemployment rate includes those who have work, but say they need more work. In other words, they are not, the income they receive is not enough, so they say they want to work even more hours than what they currently have. So they have work, but they're not working enough based on what they want. So, So again, this shows you a decreasing trend over time. Okay. But notice that there has been a recent spike in the underemployment rate. It reached around 15%, but now it's 18%. So economists are still studying what the possible cause of that is. Now, last year, Senator Grispo claimed that there too much work kills. Okay, and about 8 million Filipinos are overworked. Okay. Now, this is a controversial claim. This was shared around 28,000 times on Facebook. Okay, so many people can relate to this. Okay, but if you look at the figures, okay, the data actually show you how many Filipinos are overworked. Meaning, they are working more hours. Okay, more than 48 hours in a week. Okay, now. The latest figures show that there are about 8.1 million Filipinos who are overworked, okay? But if you compute that based on their share to the total employed Filipinos, that's actually just 21%, okay? So even if so many Filipinos are overworked, okay, their share to the total employed is actually not that high, and it's actually been decreasing in recent years. Okay, so that's another way of looking at the jobs situation. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the economic situation in the Philippines in terms of incomes, prices, and jobs. Now yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Before we get to this.
Sure.
So what should be the inflation rate in order for the middle class to feel? Because you just indicated the poor, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because to a certain degree, for an inflation rate to be felt by the middle class, what should be the rate?
What do you mean by felt by
I mean, at least the lower middle class. Because it's something that, I mean,
Yeah.
we all know that, I mean, these are the biggest voting population also. I mean, the crucial voting.
Yeah. Mm.
So, if you would have salary point one. At what rate would the middle class feel the impact
Yeah.
of the inflation rate?
Well, actually, the blue line refers to the poorest 30%. So actually, that refers to a lot, several millions of Filipinos already. Yeah. In fact, in the train law, we will see later on that train has an impact on inflation. But the train law actually includes a provision that provides for the poorest 30%. So they know that the poorest Filipinos will really feel the impact of train. Okay? But so far, the PSA does not publish the inflation rate felt by, for example, the next 30% or the that can be done, but it's not part of the official statistics yet. But it's possible to do that.
But the average should be 5.1.
Yeah, but so 5.1 refers to the average Filipino. So around the middle
So
of
we feel, all Filipinos be feeling the 5.1. We feel
on average, yeah, on average, yeah. For the rich, they may even feel a different inflation rate as well. But for the average Filipino, because the inflation rate is measured based on what's called the consumer price index. So the government surveys the prices of goods and services commonly bought by the average Filipino. So it's always from the perspective of the average Filipino. So for example, rice, sardines, canned goods, ano pa? Haircuts. So those commonly bought by the average Filipino consumer. So, for example, if the reason why there has to be a change in the base year from 2006 and 2012 because the goods and services consumed by the average Filipino in 2006 may not necessarily be the same as the goods he or she consumes in 2012. So you have to take into account the changes in the preferences of Filipinos over time. So in other words, you have to watch a different set of goods and services. Yeah. Every 6 years, that's
So this,
yeah.
so this 2018, they will have another new one for 2018.
Oh yeah, after 6 years from now, that will be changed from 2012 to the 2018 base year. It's an international standard. Yeah. But it's a lucky thing for the Duterte government because, as I said, it allowed them to say that inflation is lower than it actually is. Okay. It's a cheat. It's a cheat. Okay. But yeah, the timing is good for them. Any more questions? Okay, see, I'll proceed to the economic policies of President Duterte. So I will run down through a number of policies. Some of them more controversial than others. Okay, some of them with more impact than others. So let's start with the war on drugs, and then the Boracay shutdown, NFA rice policy, train bill, and federalism. Okay, so three small policies and then three rather big ones. Okay, from the micro up to the macro. Okay, now. So let's begin with the war on drugs. So the war on drugs, as you know, has already killed around 20,000 Filipinos since the middle of 2016. That's already so much more than the death toll from the Marcos administration. How many died from that? Around 3,000. Sorry. 4,000. Ano lang ba? Around 3 to 6,000. Let's put it at that.
A smaller population.
We had a smaller population then, okay? But right now, so actually, it's useful to look at it in relative terms. But in absolute terms, the fact that 20,000 people have died is already something to be so worried about. Now, all of that war on drugs was partly based on President Duterte's claim that there are around 3 to 4 million drug users in the Philippines, okay? But even using that claim, okay, if you check the data, it's not true. Okay? That is a bloated figure. So this one shows you the estimate of President Duterte. Whenever he gives a speech, before it started with 3 million and then it became 3.5 and then it became 4. Okay, he doesn't really know. Okay? He's just making it up as he goes along. But if you look at, so back in 2015, the Dangerous Drugs Board actually conducted a survey estimating the number of drug users in the Philippines. And they found it to be around 1.8 million Filipinos only. Okay? Now, it's a survey, so there's a margin of error. Okay? But even accounting for the margin of error, you come up with 1 to 2.5 million Filipinos. That's still below the estimate of President Duterte of at least 3 million Filipinos. Okay? So in other words, President Duterte's drug war is based on an imaginary statistic. Okay? A bloated figure that he keeps on repeating, that people take it as it is, they believe it. Okay? Sabi nga, they say nga, di ba? Ano yun? When you repeat something enough times, people believe it to be true. Parang ganun. Something like that. So that the same goes here. Okay? Even if the official estimate is just so much lower. Now the problem with here is that with the drug war, if I, for example, I am the government and I ask Sir Atoy, I mean, it's an honest to goodness survey of drug use. For example, I come up to Sir Atoy, do you use drugs? What's the likely answer of Sir Atoy? Given the drug war?
Yes.
Yes, right? Okay, so he's so honest, okay, he will still say yes. But for the average Filipino, okay, when asked, diba, there's a chilling effect. Okay? So you cannot now conduct any proper study on drug use because everyone you ask, or most of them, will just say no. Okay? People will die. Okay? Because of the environment that we're living in right now. Okay? So we don't know. So we don't already know what's the real figure. And that's because of the drug war. Okay? We cannot conduct a proper study now. So that's another bad impact of the war on drugs. Okay, so in an effort to lie to the Filipino people, the Duterte government has come up with a number of creative ways to show wrong statistics, okay, or lie using statistics. So for example, if you look here, okay, this one comes from the PNP. It shows you, okay, this seems to show over time a reduction in the number of homicide cases reported from 2010 up to 2016. Okay? But if you look at it closer, okay, so this one shows you the figure for 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. But there are two columns referring to 2016. Okay? So these one are annual numbers, okay, yearly. But this one shows you January to June, so 6 months, okay? And yet, it is presented here as if it is just another year, okay? Now, again, so if you look at the last column, okay, it's even shorter, July 1 up to August 3, okay? And yet, okay, the graph is evenly spaced, so without knowing the actual context, okay, you would see that every year, the crime or murder homicide cases are going down. But this one is showing you figures that are not comparable to the previous data points. Okay, so yeah, so in an effort to show you that there's a drastic, you would think that there's a drastic reduction in murder and homicide cases, but that's actually a figment of the statistics. Another way they have cheated with statistics is by, again, showing you different bars, okay, of different durations. So, for example, this one shows you the drug cases filed. So, the hypothesis is that because of the drug war, okay, the number of drug cases filed has gone down, okay? But again, they're showing you, for example, the first bar shows you the data for 2011 to 2014 on average, okay, the average for those 4 years. And then the annual figure for 2015, and then the 2016 annual figure that they even distinguish between the Aquino and the Duterte administration, okay? And then a steep reduction as of 2017, but as of April 20. So what do they really want to say? Okay, you can't know precisely because they are using data points of different durations. Okay. But if you just look at at first glance, it would seem that there's a very steep reduction in the number of murder and homicide cases in the Philippines, when in fact there is none. Okay, so that's the war on drugs. So the statistics are being botched. Yes.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yes.
Okay, so this number, they can hear me.
Right.
This number, 4,776, that gets reported on April 20th, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know, right, as rational people, that that's 4 out of 12 months.
Yeah.
When this number gets reported in the press,
Yeah.
does the press then take that number and annualize it to show that, going forward, really, you're looking at a number that's going to be 3.25 times higher than the one that you're seeing?
Yeah.
Doesn't anybody do that?
I'm afraid not, because that's one other thing about the journalists in the Philippines. Like journalism. Not enough journalists in the Philippines have economic training. Okay, and in fact, so I write for Rappler. Do you know Rappler? Do you read Rappler? So
You'll be closed down soon.
well, hopefully not. For my sake as well. But a few months back, they actually invited me to give a crash course in economics for their reporters. Okay. For example, they want to know how to look at economic news, what's the best angle to look at them, how to read economic statistics. And so these are millennials. Okay, Rappler has very young reporters, around early 20s. But you can just imagine, for other news agencies, there are not enough people with journalists with economic training. So whenever they see figures, okay, they just that's another problem is, if you're a journalist, you're just reporting the facts. Okay. For example, if you attend the press conference of the government which says that there is a drastic reduction on the statistics, they just report it as is. At the bare minimum, because that's basically their job, to tell what, for example, what other people are telling, even if it's a lie. Okay? And the same goes, for example, with President Duterte. When President Duterte says something,
3.4.
yeah, even if, so they're obligated, because of their job, to report it as it is. So it takes an extra effort to actually, for example, annualize this figure. That's important, but yeah, I mean, not enough journalists are going that way.
The thing that I'm finding perplexing in this is that if you take that 4,776 number and you annualize it, assuming its accuracy,
Yeah.
you're coming up with a total around 15,500 for the year. That
Yeah.
still shows a significant drop, and it's good news. So,
Well, yeah.
so why not just annualize that number and show the good news?
Yeah, because
Why does
yeah.
the good news have to be so extreme? Is kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know
Okay.
why they're doing
That's
this.
all right. And if that's just
Yeah.
the way they do it to try and show that dramatic
Yeah.
drop,
Mhm. I have
I
this one
get that.
art. Yes, that's a real problem. And in fact, I have a previous article showing other examples by which they lied with the statistics. Yeah.
Thank you.
There are many other examples, not just this.
Thank you.
Okay, so another issue, another economic policy is the shutdown of Boracay. So how many of you have actually gone to Boracay? Nice place, right? So even if with all the algae.
I've been there.
Okay. Yeah, but when it opens again. So President Duterte closed Boracay for the next 6 months. Okay. But the problem is there's no actual study or cost-benefit analysis or without anything. He just closed it. Now, for example, back in late March or early April, the Secretaries of Tourism, Environment, and Interior came up with a recommendation. That's just one page, okay? We recommend that Boracay shut down for the next 6 months, but after that, there's no more after that. There's no appendix, there's no accompanying study. When in fact, you would think that for a policy that kills around 36,000 jobs in one go, okay, so that's one estimate. So the Boracay shutdown for the next 6 months kills 36,000 jobs at least and around 56 billion pesos in revenues, okay? That's a very drastic thing if you live in Boracay. If you're just an ordinary citizen living there, the next 6 months could be devastating for you. And yet, the policy proceeded without the benefit of any proper study. Okay? Now, it so happens that I worked before with the National Economic Development Authority, which is the official planning agency of the government. And some of my friends who are still there said that there was actually an attempt to estimate the economic impact of the Boracay shutdown for the next 6 months. And the estimate is that it would reduce GDP, total income, by 1%. At most, 0.1% lang. Okay, 0.1% of GDP will go down. Now that's small in relative terms. Okay, no one would think that's large. Pero 56 billion is still 56 billion. Okay, and 36,000 jobs are still 36,000 jobs. And yet, actually, President Duterte's decision came before the study was actually sent to Malacanang. Okay? So they did not wait for any study before they proceeded with this policy. And at the same time, okay, there is talk about the entry of a Chinese mega casino in Boracay, if you've heard of this. Okay? So at the same time that President Duterte is closing Boracay for its residents and tourists, okay, there's an incoming $500 million mega casino investment by the Chinese. Okay? As you know, President Duterte has pivoted, his foreign policy has pivoted to the Chinese. Okay? And he's giving favors to the Chinese left and right. And this is one example of that. So, set in 2019, construction is set in 2019. So you would think that is he closing Boracay as a way to pave the way to this incoming mega casino? What's the deal with the closure? Did he really have to close the entire island? Well, the ostensible reason is that he wants to do it for environmental purposes. Okay? Pero, if you think about this, okay, mapapaisip ka, you will really think, what's really going on here? Okay, there's something more to this Boracay shutdown than it seems.
Go ahead.
Yes.
No, but having said that, I mean, but there will be this casino resort construction.
Yeah.
That does not diminish the fact that there are serious environmental problems
Oh yes.
in Boracay.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes, actually.
Let's also not lose that part.
Oh yes,
of
yeah.
that.
That's an important part because, for example, the last time I went there, you will actually, if you go there in the summer, for example, you will really swim with the algae. The water is green in many portions during the summer, okay, and it's unsightly, okay. That's really a problem. But what I'm saying is that, is there another way to address the environmental issues without having to close it for the next 6 months? That seems to be an overreaching policy for a problem as specific as the algae or the bad sewerage. So in fact,
Also the jobs.
yeah. Oh yeah.
For all those 36,000.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's no mean thing to destroy in one go. I mean,
In the closing of islands, it's also quite normal in Thailand.
yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
The islands are really very, very badly managed.
Yeah.
My question is, are those who have lost their jobs whose main source of income is the Boracay tourism industry, are there resources like the government has proposed?
Well, the government claims to be doing that, but actually, for example, the latest I've heard is that the government is giving jobs for residents, but as sweepers in the roads, for example, 200 pesos a day, and you cannot exceed 1 month. After 1 month, you cannot renew that contract with the government. So I mean, for residents losing their jobs for the next 6 months, their established livelihood, that's a big thing. To switch from your, I mean, if you're uprooted from your current job and you're forced to switch to another lesser or menial job, that's not an easy thing.
And a lot of workers in Boracay are migrant workers as well.
Yeah, from Malay, because it's part of Malay municipality. Oh yeah, that's I mean, they're really forced to look for alternative sources of income. yeah. So there seems to be a disconnect between the policy objective and the actual policy. That's what I'm saying here. And at the very least, there should be some proper study conducted or some contingency plan, right, to account for the lost jobs and the lost incomes. But there's none. And up to now, there's none of that. Okay, so moving on to NFA rice. So I said that before that NFA rice is subsidized rice. Now, it turns out that I look at the website of the NFA, the statistics there for the stock of NFA rice in comparison with commercial rice, and which is pricier, and household rice. Now, this is very striking because
What's the difference between commercial rice and household?
household rice is rice that is not sold in markets. Commercial rice is bought and sold in markets, whereas household rice, for example, is existing stocks of rice in the farm, in the household, etc. That's not bought and sold. So, but this one is the most crucial thing here, the stock of NFA rice. The purpose of the NFA is to provide at least a minimum amount of rice, for example, to provide for emergencies, okay, so that the poor can still buy some rice. But note that, starting with in the past few years, okay, somehow the trends for commercial rice and NFA rice have not strayed from one another too much. But since President Duterte started, there has been a precipitous drop in the supply of NFA rice, in the stock of NFA rice, to the point that last March or April, there's almost none left. Okay? And one of the reasons behind this is the botched policies of Jason Aquino, the administrator of the NFA. For example, one of his policies is to divert rice from Region 8, which is Leyte, Samar, to private buyers in Bulacan. Okay? Because it so happens that his wife comes from Bulacan and has links to the local rice traders in Bulacan. So they get so in other words, the rice that should have been stockpiled for people in the Visayas, they have been diverted to rice traders in Bulacan because of the connection with Jason Aquino's wife. So that's just one reason behind this. But notice that this has started, there is almost a continuous drop in the stock of NFA rice since President Duterte came, to the point na ngayon wala na. Okay, so why did that happen? How did it have to come to this point? President Duterte has yet to answer for this. Because this hasn't happened in the past years. If you notice, the stock of NFA rice did not even reach about 250,000 metric tons, as low as that. Pero when Duterte came in, there's almost none of it left. Okay, so yeah. Another main factor is that there still because the NFA is a monopoly in rice importation, and that is one of the policies that economists want to remove. In other words, allow the trading of rice to be determined by supply and demand rather than a single government agency which has the monopoly on all imported rice. So because the NFA, for example, makes forecasts about the demand for rice. And based on that forecast, it tells how much rice to import. But because, for example, the NFA has not sufficient technical expertise and manpower, they frequently over-import or under-import. Okay? And that's one reason why the NFA rice is so unstable. So economists are suggesting that remove the NFA's monopoly on rice importation and allow the market to import based on supply and demand. Yeah, for the longest time they have been advocating that but as you can expect, there's a lot of insider trading and vested interest in rice. Many people in government have links to the private sector, so they give the contracts for importation to their favored, to their friends, in other words. So it's not in their interest they don't want NFA monopoly to be removed. So they're opposing all efforts to do that. That's unfortunate because rice is so important to the, as you know, to the Filipino culture.
So what explains the downward trend? Is it because importation has declined or?
A combination of both. So mismanagement of the NFA and the continuing monopoly of NFA in rice importation.
But that has been the same, that has been the case even earlier. So why is it on the downward trend? Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, what changed here? If we take it to be correct so of course the NFA has always had a monopoly on rice importation, but what changed here? President Duterte came in and then all of a sudden the stock of NFA rice plummeted. So is that a coincidence or did they not, I mean, that has started way back in 2016. It's already 2018. Did they not do anything about it? Did they? Well, I mean, they should have observed this. For example, there's a steep decline here and another steep decline here. Why is nothing being addressed, or what policy is not being changed? So yeah, I mean, many people are pointing to the. I mean, if you read the other stories with Jason Aquino, they are quite spectacular. The corruption that goes into rice importation and administration. Now, the poor don't have access anymore to NFA rice. We are waiting. So, well, this is one more thing. So, in the absence of NFA rice, we need to import rice. Okay? So, for example, but the government is favoring importing directly from other governments like Vietnam and Thailand, for example, which are more efficient in producing rice. But the problem is that compared to importation of rice through markets, okay, if importation of rice is set by contracts with other governments, then that again attracts corruption in the rice sector.
Favoring other governments like Vietnam and Thailand.
Mhm.
That started with them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Started even before.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I mean, compared to relative to other means of importing rice, that seems to be more prone to corruption. Yeah. Yes. Well, smuggling is really just indication that there's not enough rice. There's a shortage of rice. So as long as there is a shortage in rice, you can expect that there will always be some sort of smuggling. So yeah, I mean, people have to eat rice. So where will they get their rice? If it means having to smuggle rice into the country, then by all means, people will do that. But yeah, this one. So there's no more NFA rice. So the poor are forced to consume commercial rice, which is more expensive. Now, if you took basic economics, there's supply and demand. If the demand for a good increases, what happens to the price of that good? That also increases. So there has been a recent spike in the price of regular milled and well-milled rice, as basic economics predicts. Okay. Now note that there has always also been a steep increase in the price of rice in the previous administration. As I said before, there was a mini rice crisis back then because of the Alcalatin. Okay, that is another one of the low points in the previous administration. But again, we don't want to repeat that, so this one has to be addressed as soon as possible. Okay, so those are just 3 examples of Duterte's economic policies. Let's move on to some more substantive and far-reaching policies. With train, build, and federalism. So train, let's start with train. So what is train? Train is tax reform for acceleration and inclusion, signed last December. This, by the way, is my former boss in the World Bank, si Carl Chua, who was recruited by DOF's Secretary Dominguez to be his undersecretary for strategy. And his train is actually his brainchild. He's actually a graduate of the UP School of Economics. Back in 2011, he got his PhD. And his PhD dissertation was about tax reform. Okay, so back in the day, he's already thinking about these issues. And he jumped on the opportunity to realize some of his vision for the tax system through the DOF. Okay? Now the ostensible aim of train is to make the tax system simpler, fairer, and more efficient. Okay? And partly it aims to amass resources for build, which is the infrastructure push of the Duterte administration. Roads, bridges, etc. But the train also aims to lessen the overall tax burden of the poor and the middle class. So there actually is, there are many good reasons for train actually. Okay? Because for the longest time, the Philippine tax system has been beleaguered by so many problems. For example, let's try to link these train with established principles in taxation. So for example, tax rules should be as plain and simple as possible, okay? So that, and if the tax system is easier to comply with taxes, then people will pay more taxes, they will be encouraged to pay their taxes, okay? But the problem is, the Philippine tax system is complicated and burdensome, okay? So for example, in the last Global Competitiveness Report, we ranked 127 out of 189 countries in terms of the ease of paying taxes, okay? Just below Afghanistan and Iraq, okay? So if you survey businessmen, okay, and what are the top issues that prevent them, for example, from setting up business in the Philippines, complex tax regulations and high tax rates are among the top 5 reasons, okay? So we have to address that problem. Now, fairer. So we want the tax system to be fairer. Okay. So one way to do this is by so-called widening the tax base. In other words, taxing as many goods as possible, so that the tax rate for any single product is as low as possible as well. But the problem is that too many Filipinos are getting away with not paying their taxes. If you remember this is an advertisement of the BIR, Bureau of Internal Revenue, which shows a doctor, okay, piggybacking on a public school teacher. Okay, and the message is that as a share of their respective incomes, okay, the tax burden on the public school teacher is larger than the tax burden of the professional, the doctor, okay? So because the problem is that professionals, okay, so a bulk of income taxes in the Philippines are paid by compensation earners, okay? More than the self-employed and the professionals. So the tax burden on the professionals, they can hide some of their income kasi, okay? Compared to a public school teacher, they cannot escape, okay, paying their taxes because government, for example, okay? So, from 2010 to 2013, compensation earners earned 60% of all incomes but paid 80% of all taxes. So, there's an inherent unfairness in that. So, for example, from 2010 to 2013, as a share of all taxes, okay, more than 80% is paid by compensation earners, wage and salary earners, ordinary middle class or the working class, okay? Whereas only less than 20% is paid by the self-employed and the professionals, like lawyers, like doctors, okay, economists, okay. So yeah, economists are complicit in this. Pero yeah, this is a very, so in fact, the share of the incomes paid by compensation earners is actually increasing, okay. So in other words, mukhang totoo yan, okay? Napasan nung mga public school teacher yung mga doctors. Okay, so another principle of taxation is that taxes should be levied according to people's ability to pay. In other words, the tax system should be as progressive as possible. The higher your income is, the higher the higher the share of your income paid in taxes, and the lower your income is, your share, the percent of your income paid for in taxes should be also lower. Okay, so it should be fair. But the problem is, the Philippine tax system is mildly progressive and even borderline regressive. Taxes on dividends and capital incomes are low, and petroleum taxes, which are consumed more by the rich, are actually stagnant for the longest time. Okay? So considering that, more than half of all petroleum products in the Philippines are consumed by just the richest 10% of the population. So this one shows you, okay, Filipinos of varying incomes from poorest to richest, and the share of their income going to fuel products. Okay, and this shows you that because, so for example, this one includes people with cars. Okay, but those who can afford cars are richer. Okay, so naturally they would consume more than half of all petroleum products in the Philippines, whereas the poorest only consume 0.2% of their only account for 0.2% of all fuel expenditures. Okay. So there. So for example, if you increase the taxes on petroleum products, then who will get hurt the most? The richest or the poorest? The richest, because they account for more than half of all petroleum product expenditures. Now this one shows you that for a range of different petroleum products, premium, regular gas, even aviation turbo fuel, the excise taxes or the tax per liter has been constant for the longest time. Okay? And yet, the retail prices of these goods have been increasing. Okay? So in other words, this one is a missed opportunity in the sense that you would think that as these products become more expensive, you can actually earn more tax revenues by having the excise taxes follow the trend of their prices. Pag pamahal ng pamahal, if it becomes more expensive, the tax per liter should also be higher, okay? And the government can earn even more, okay? But it has not been the case. Now, we also want the tax system to be more efficient, okay? Because the higher your tax is, for example, if you think of your income tax, okay, the higher the income tax, okay, will you become more or less motivated to work? The higher your income tax is, you will be less incentivized to work. Okay, so we want it to be as low as possible. But the problem is that, for example, income taxes in the Philippines are some of the highest in the ASEAN region. The corporate income tax, for example, is around 30%. Okay, and this might turn off investors who would prefer to do business in other ASEAN countries. This one shows you, compares the personal income taxes, corporate income taxes, and value-added taxes for these ASEAN countries. And notice that for the Philippines, we have the highest corporate income tax of 30%. Okay? Whereas personal income taxes, okay, are also some of the highest, although it's higher in Vietnam and here in Thailand. Okay? And the VAT is also the highest in the Philippines at 12%. Okay? So we have some of the highest tax rates in the region, and this might be affecting economic activity. So we want this to be lower and closer to the ASEAN average. Now the frame affects people's incomes in this way. So it changes the tax brackets of many different classes of workers. So for example, those earning 10,000 and below up to 140,000, 250,000, they will now be considered, with the first phase of frame, their personal income tax will now be 0%. Okay? And these are a lot of people, actually. Okay? Now, for those earning above 250,000, okay, instead of 30,000, it will become 20%. And those earning 500,000 and up, okay, will also have a change in their income rates. Okay? And this one is for the first phase and the second phase. Okay? Again, the objective is to lower the personal income taxes paid by Filipinos as much as possible. Now, the value-added tax in the Philippines is also quite high, 12%, compared to Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand is just 7%, okay? And then Malaysia, 6%. The Philippines also has the most number of exemptions, okay? So the value-added tax should be applied, again, we said before that we want the tax base to be as wide as possible. We want to tax as many goods as possible. But in the Philippines, it also turns out that we have the most number of exceptions to the value-added tax. In other words, those goods that are not that where the VAT will not apply. Okay? 59 lines versus 37, 25. Here in Thailand, 35 and then 14. Now, we have some of the highest income tax rates in ASEAN, and yet tax revenues are actually lower. Okay, so even if the tax rates in Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia are lower on average, they're actually earning more. Okay, in terms of percent GDP. Okay, so in other words, they are more efficient in their collection of taxes. Okay, they don't have to tax as much, and yet they earn a lot more. Okay, so that
more tax evaders.
we have more tax evaders. Sorry. Yeah, we can wheedle our way out of the tax system more. Okay, now at the same time, so train reduces personal income taxes, and yet we cannot have a situation where the government will run out of money. Okay, so train also includes so binabawi niya. There's also a commensurate increase in the excise taxes for different kinds of goods. So for example, cigarettes, okay. Whereas before, the previous law, the tax on cigarettes is 30%, to 30 pesos, okay, per unit, some unit, okay. It becomes 30 to 35, 37, and 40, okay. So there are some goods and services where the taxes actually increase, okay, as a way to mitigate the reduction in tax revenues because of the lower income taxes, okay. Sugar, sweetened beverages. If you go to Jollibee right now, pineapple juice is so expensive because of train. Okay, those using caloric sweeteners, okay, high fructose corn syrup. This is a new tax. Okay, before there's no tax on those things. Now there is. Petroleum products. So across all of these, okay, this is the old tax rate for the old law per liter, and then it increases drastically, okay? So for example, before lubricating oil increases 4.5, it becomes 8, and then it increases over time, okay? But note that, so you can expect that all these industries will actually resist train. And each of these sectors will have a lobbyist in Congress. Okay? Depending on their power to lobby, that dictates the increase in their excise tax. So for example, there was a very powerful lobby of the LPG industry, so that you notice the increase in their taxes is just 1 peso per liter. Okay? They were able to. It was higher in the original proposal. They brought it down because of intense lobbying. Okay. Automobiles, okay, so in an effort, so again, we want a train goes for the incomes of the rich, and the rich are more not able to buy vehicles, so naturally, they want to increase the taxes on automobiles. So the tax brackets for those change as well. Although I'll show you a graph later on where this actually did not come to fruition. In fact, for some types of vehicles, bumaba yung excise taxes, especially on luxury vehicles, which are the favorite of congressmen. Okay. Now, train, okay, will generate revenue. Okay. Now, where will that go? Now, around 70% will go into build. Okay. And military, sports facilities, and potable drinking water. And then the rest will go to education, health, targeted nutrition. So by this alone, you can see that there's really a priority for infrastructure right now in the government compared to education and health. Okay? And in fact, if you look at the 2018 budget of the Philippine government, in the Constitution, it's supposed to be that education takes the lion's share of the budget. Basic education, elementary, high school. And yet in the 2018 budget, if you look at the distribution of the prioritization, there's a large, DPWH, Department of Public Works and Highways, now consumes the largest chunk instead of DepEd. Okay.
JC?
Yes.
Those are legislative remarks.
Actually, if you look at the text of train, it's there. Now, now this goes into build. So this is the other half of the main economic policies of Duterte. So he wants to pursue a very aggressive infrastructure project. Okay. Now this one is another misleading graph, by the way. But it aims to show you that the Duterte administration wants to spend so much on infrastructure compared to the previous administrations. Okay. But the bad thing about this graph is that, again, it compares different data points of different years. So if you look at the first one, Marcos, 3.2% of GDP went into infrastructure. That's 21 years worth of data summarized in one bar. Okay. Whereas in Aquino, there's a reduction now, 2.2, stagnation. Arroyo, even lower, Aquino 2.9, and then now they're aiming for 5.4%. But again, so another thing is, these are actual numbers and this one is just hypothetical, okay? So this has not yet actually occurred. And yet, if you read this graph, it seems that they're doing so much better now than the previous administrations. Okay? Now, build, it aims to produce more railways or urban mass transport, airports, seaports, bridges, roads, and better cities. So, for example, if you go to Clark right now, okay, there's a very aggressive push to modernize Clark, okay, as an alternative for Manila. Kasi Manila is so congested that even, in fact, some government agencies are planning to move to Clark. Much to the resistance of government employees who will have to transplant to Clark instead of Manila. Anyway, now, one of the justifications for this is for the infrastructure push is that this is a good time now to pursue infrastructure because the President Duterte has a rather authoritarian bent. Okay, and this one is Enrique Razon, one of the more prominent businessmen in the Philippines. Okay, his businesses are mainly imports. Okay, and he said that democracy and infrastructure do not mix well. Okay, and in fact, infrastructure thrives in authoritarian regimes. But so he said, countries with the most advanced infrastructure are the ones that are not democratic. The countries with the best infrastructure in the world are dictatorships. Now, I made an article out of this, and then I look at the data, okay, showing you the quality of infrastructure across countries, and then by type of government. Now, if you look here, okay, so Enrique Razon is claiming that infrastructure in authoritarian regimes are of superior quality. Okay, but if you look at the data, there's such a wide discrepancy in variation in the quality of infrastructure in authoritarian regimes. So, for example, maybe he was thinking of countries like China, okay, with good infrastructure, with an authoritarian regime. But at the same time, you have countries in Africa where the quality of infrastructure is so low with an authoritarian regime. So the variation is so large, okay. Whereas if you look at full democracies, okay, based on the classification of the Economist Intelligence Unit, the variation in infrastructure quality is concentrated on high levels. Okay? Yeah?
Isn't it also, Darren Acemoglu has written a lot about how infrastructure in authoritarian regimes tends to be concession-based foreign direct investment, which leads to massive currency account deficits, capital account deficits. And full democratic regimes tend to have a much higher multiplier in their currency domestically, so their current account deficit tends to be much stronger, leading to a much more durable infrastructure reinvestment.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the nuances that doesn't really go into some of the debates right now going in the Philippines, that the nature of infrastructure projects in authoritarian regimes are different from the nature of contracts, for example, in full democracies.
And doesn't the Philippines currently have a full tax concession for imported components right now anyway? Which is another reason to have a big current account deficit there and a big chunk taken out of your taxes. If everything that's coming into your country is capital equipment produced elsewhere, because you have such a unique concession, non-tax foreign components. Versus if you were, I'm from the United States, if you were to bring components into the United States and you were to bring them in, they would have a duty and a sales tax and everything applied to their consumption.
Yes, actually, that's one of the targets of the second component of TRAIN. So TRAIN is a set of packages. Every year, there's a new TRAIN bill. And the focus of the second TRAIN bill is investment incentives. So, for example, the argument is that there are so many investors in the Philippines right now who enjoy incentives that they don't really need. They will still do business in the Philippines even without those incentives. Okay, so the proliferation of excess incentives is a loss for the government. So they're trying to address that in the second version of TRAIN, which is already in the works. But that's right. When you look at the data, there's actually a current account deficit right now, but it's small relative to GDP. I'll show you the graph later. Okay, so Build is such a large project. Duterte wants to spend as much as 8 trillion pesos up until the last year of his administration, up to 2022. 8 trillion pesos. Okay, but where will we get that money? We still don't know. Okay. Now he says that, for example, 66% will come from tax revenues and 14% will come from train. So in other words, train will just be one small drop in the bucket when it comes to the overall spending on build. Okay. 15% will come from official development assistance. This is wrong. Official development assistance, okay, coming from other countries and multilateral agencies like the World Bank. And then 18% from public-private partnerships, and then other undetermined sources. I don't know what that is. But yeah, my point is that where will Duterte get the money? Train is just one part of the equation. Now, moving on, another big project of Duterte is federalism. Okay, so he wants to, this one is big. He wants to change the form of government, okay, from a unitary presidential system into some sort of hybrid federal system, okay, where the country will be cut up essentially into different governments. There's still like the US, there's still a federal government, but yeah, I mean, different regions right now will have more autonomy about the laws that they can pass, the taxes they can levy, etc. Now, one of the impetus for this is that Duterte keeps on saying that, and the proponents of federalism say that Metro Manila, NCR, the National Capital Region, has an imperial nature. It tends to dominate not just in politics but also in economics. Now, to some extent, that's actually true because if the total GDP of the Philippines, if you cut that up by origin, place of origin, for every 100 pesos of GDP, 30% comes from NCR alone. Okay, and 60% comes from NCR, Central Luzon, and Calabar Zone. Okay, so economic activity is really concentrated around Metro Manila. Okay, to the point that there's almost no economic activity going on elsewhere. Okay, now, so that's true. Okay, but the debates miss the fact that NCR is actually not the fastest growing region. In other words, some other regions are actually growing faster. Now this one shows you the GDP, okay, of different regions in the Philippines, not just for the Philippines in general, which is this, okay. So between 2009 to 2016, the GDP of the Philippines grew by 53%. But the GDP of Central Visayas actually grew by 74%, okay. Followed by Caraga, 70%, Central Luzon, 66%. Davao actually grew at 62%. Followed by NCR, which is 56.8%. So in other words, even if a bulk of economic activity is concentrated in Metro Manila, other regions are actually catching up, okay, somehow, okay? Now the real problem lies in the fact that many other regions are still lagging behind. Okay? In other words, they are growing slower. So, in other words, some very poor regions like Bicol, okay, like ARM, are actually growing so much slower, which means that the prospects of catching up to Metro Manila are actually dim. Okay? So that's the real problem here. If you plot this, so this horizontal axis shows you the income levels of different regions, and this one shows you the growth rate, how fast they are growing. If you plot this, there seems to be, well, this is a weak relationship, okay, admittedly, but it seems to suggest that the richer your region is, the faster it is growing. In other words, if you want the poor regions to catch up, for example, like ARM, okay, you would want ARM, for example, to be growing so fast, okay, so eventually it will catch up with Metro Manila. But as things are, okay, the poorer regions are actually, on average, growing slower. Okay, and so NCR, on the one extreme, NCR is so rich, okay, one of the richest, okay, and is also one of the fastest growing. Whereas ARM, okay, the poorest, is even actually declining. Okay, there's a decline in GDP per person between 2009 to 2016. In other words, people in ARM right, in 2016 are actually poorer than they were back in 2009, which is quite disturbing because ARM is one of the really sticking points when it comes to development in the Philippines. Again, that's another argument against regional autonomy. ARM has its own autonomous government, autonomous region for Muslim Mindanao, and yet it is the poorest until now. So in other words, it's just because you have an autonomy over your government or your jurisdiction, it doesn't automatically mean that you will develop as a region. So if that argument holds for the overall debate in federalism, then it doesn't really bode well. There's a weak economic argument when it comes to federalism. On top of the fact that there are so many political issues involved in federalism. Okay, right now, for example, I don't know for example, own municipalities, some mayors actually control a lot of local businesses. Okay. So to the extent that they actually actively exclude competitors to their own businesses, okay? And with federalism, you will give them even more power to determine who gets into their jurisdiction. So there are so many ramifications. And then political dynasties as well. Right now, there's so many political dynasties, and if they have more control over their own governments, then what will happen to their local power? Okay, will it even embed the culture of political dynasties more or not? Right? So those are some of the economic policies of late. What are the impacts? Okay, let's venture into some possible impacts. So I would contend that for at least train, build, and federalism, there are good intentions, okay, but wrong execution. Okay. Some of the justifications for these policies are actually good, okay? Like the need to improve the tax system, the need for infrastructure, and the need for regional convergence. And yet, in the way the Duterte government is doing it, okay, train, for example, there is wrong timing, as I'll show you later. Build, there's questionable funding, and then federalism, there's really just outright bad implementation. To the extent that he wants to revamp the constitution and actually instill an authoritarian system of government. Okay. Now for OFWs in particular, okay. For example, we'll show later that train has an impact on inflation to the extent that it increases the prices of some commodities. And all commodities in general, inflation in general is higher because of train. Now, if you are an OFW, for example, you're sending remittances at home, okay? I'll show later that the peso is actually becoming weaker against the dollar, which means that for every dollar you earn, it actually translates into more pesos back at home. Okay, but at the same time, inflation is so high now right now. Okay, so the additional money that your relatives or your family gets in the Philippines, okay, that increases because of the weak peso, but at the same time, the inflation rate is so high, okay, so it actually counteracts the beneficial effects of a weak peso. Now, President Duterte also wants OFWs to come home and work for the Build project, but the Build project has been troubled with so many delays, okay, and there's really no assurance that the OFWs returning home will get the promised jobs, okay. And in fact, for example, if you're not an engineer or a welder or a construction worker, then what kind of job will you fit into the larger Build scheme? And then federalism, okay, needless to say, will bring so many changes to the economic lives of your family back at home. Right? Now, this one is a screenshot of one of my friends at the DOF, one of the technical people working there. Behind the scenes of train, okay, one of my friends took a screenshot and sent it to me. Okay, on the promise that I will not share this, but here it is. Okay. I'm showing you right now the impact of train on Filipinos' incomes. Okay, on Filipinos of different income levels, so from the poor up to the rich, executives, CEOs, etc. If it's green, it means that it's an increase in your income. If it is red, it is a decrease in your income. And this one is hard to read, so I made graphs out of it. So it's easier to understand. So, across all of these different Filipinos, okay, how much will your annual income change because of train? Okay? Now this one is 0, so to the right of 0, it means that your income will increase. Okay, to the left, it will decrease. Now, immediately, you will notice that the largest decreases in incomes will be felt by the top taxpayers. Okay? Again, in an effort to make the tax system more progressive. Okay? Anti-rich and then pro-poor. Okay? But at the same time, if you look carefully, the incomes of the poorest 3 income groups, the poor and then subsistence poor, actually also decrease. Okay? And to the extent that there are millions of people in these categories, okay, then so many people will see lower incomes. Okay? Now, as for the benefits, the largest benefits will come for the middle class and the professionals, okay, who will see a large reduction in their personal income taxes as we discussed earlier. But one of the reasons why there's a reduction in the incomes of the poor is that, number one, their incomes will not increase because of train. Because in the first place, if you're a minimum wage earner, you are exempt from income taxes to begin with, okay? So if train decreases the income taxes of the working people, you will not feel it because you were exempt to begin with. But at the same time, okay, your income did not change, and yet the prices of goods and services increased because of train's inflationary impact. So the net effect is a reduction in your income. Now this one is the total effect of train, but as I said before, there's so many moving parts to train. Train has many components. It changed so many things. We can actually break this down. So let's start with the impact of train on your income tax alone. Okay. So for example, based on your income taxes, okay, again the top taxpayers will see large reductions, 7 to 9% of their annual incomes. And for the rest, there will actually be higher incomes, okay? Even for the subsistence poor, but it's not that it's so much smaller than the increase in incomes if you're a middle-class worker or a professional, okay? So this one is based on the change in income taxes alone. This one shows you the effect of train on your income based on the changes in the value-added tax and the excise tax. As I said, As I said, train increases the excise taxes on petroleum products, sugar sweetened beverages. Note that it will affect the rich more rather than the poor. But this one is the bad effect of inflation on people's incomes. Okay, because of the impact of train on overall prices. Okay. The incomes of the subsistence poor, the poor, near poor, will see the largest declines relative to the rich. So, in other words, the poor will hurt the most from higher inflation. And as I showed before, okay, this one shows you the inflation rate, which is already above the target of the Bangko Sentral. And in fact, last Thursday, the Bangko Sentral already increased interest rates in an effort to temper inflation. Okay, so somehow they're responding to this. Okay, so federalism. Okay, this is a draft of the one proposal to cut up the Philippines into 8 different regional provinces, regional governments. Okay, but the issue is how ready are the regions when it comes to federalism? How ready are they? And for example, what % of their revenues come from local economic activity versus the national transfers from the national government? Okay. Meron palang extra slide dito. Notice that notice that in the higher inflation we've seen recently, that's because of food and beverages. Okay, that's the largest contributor to it. Okay, next is utilities, water, electricity, and then restaurant. Okay. Now, train is, I contend that train has bad timing because the it is accompanied by so many other international factors that increase the inflation rate. So, for example, the price of oil now is at its highest in more than 3 years. If you monitor the oil prices, okay. So, to the extent that oil is used across the economy, then that contributes to in a higher inflation. The peso is also at its weakest in the past 11 years. Okay. 11 years. So we're now at 52 pesos per US dollar, okay? And notice that the peso has been weakening even before the Duterte administration. But when the peso weakens, okay, the prices of imported goods increases, and that again contributes to inflation. And then on top of train, okay, then it's a triple whammy, okay, between high oil prices, a weak peso, and train. Now Duterte, okay, with his meager economic knowledge, okay, claims that the US actually manipulating the US dollar, the peso dollar exchange rate, which is not really the case because it's really determined by supply and demand. Doesn't know that. Okay. Now, trade has an additional impact on inflation to the extent that it encouraged profiteering, especially in January. Okay. Trade was supposed to increase the prices of petroleum products, but not immediately. Okay, back in January, okay, it will only increase the prices of incoming supplies, but not the current supply. And yet, some gas retailers already increased their prices, even if it's not warranted. So there's a profiteering effect of trade. So it's a triple whammy: higher world oil prices, a weaker peso, and trade. Okay, all contribute to higher inflation. So some argue actually that what if train was actually implemented during the time when inflation was low? Okay, because there was a time where inflation was low. If we go back, right before Duterte, Aquino administration, inflation with trade was actually almost zero. Okay. So prices were actually increasing so slow at that time. What if we implemented train right here? Then the effect of train on inflation would not be felt as much. But the problem is, by this time, Aquino was already a lame duck president. So there was really no chance for to pass controversial and encompassing tax reform law. Okay, so there's also a political angle here. Yes.
Doesn't focusing so much of the tax increase on home goods and essentials, isn't that inherently inflationary in a country with so many poor people? Because they will reduce their income disproportionately, which will reduce the velocity of the currency and the economy, especially among essentials that have the highest turnover in the domestic economy anyway. So isn't it just the fact that there's so many different categories of consumer goods getting the tax increase going to be inflationary no matter what the inflation rate is when you pass it?
Well, actually, that's right. But if you look at the data, okay, the blue line shows you the inflation rate felt by the poorest, 30%. Okay, so to the extent that train increases the excess of tax on petroleum products, the sugar-sweetened beverages, then that increases the prices of food and non-alcoholic beverages, and to the extent that that comprises the largest chunk of the poor's income, then the inflation rate they will feel will necessarily be higher than the average inflation rate. Okay? So again, as I said earlier, we have to monitor the blue line as well, the inflation rate being felt by the poor, not just the average Filipino. Okay? What else? Now, in train, there's actually a provision against, they anticipated this, that the poor will see reductions in their incomes, and in the latter part of the train law, there's actually a provision that a certain amount of revenues from train will actually be dedicated to cash transfers to the poor coming from the DSWD. In other words, the poorest 30% of Filipinos will actually receive money from the government in an effort to counteract the effect of train on inflation. But the amount is so small. It's just 200 pesos per month. Per family. Yeah. That's small. Needless to say. For example, regardless of your family size, for example, if you have just 2 children or 7 children, you will always give the same 200 pesos. Okay? Or that's around $4. Yes. as small. And then there's a problem because as this table here shows you, okay, so there will be millions of Filipinos Filipinos who will be receiving aid from the government, but they will not receive it at the same time. Okay, and in fact, for 2,600,000 Filipinos, they will receive aid for train August 2018. Okay, whereas higher inflation is already happening now. Okay, even as early as January, February, and yet they will receive aid 6 months later. Where will they get the money right now? Okay, that's the one problem. There's so much logistics to overcome because, for example, they still have to verify that the government has a list of poor people. Okay, they have a database, and yet they still have to verify if they are really poor to minimize the leakages. Okay, so they have to train thousands of people who will go to the rural areas to interview those to verify that they are really poor. That takes time. So August 2018 for millions of people. Now, as for the build, okay, if the government spends 8 billion pesos in infrastructure, then we must monitor the deficit to GDP ratio, okay, which means that if there's a government budget deficit, it just means that the government is spending more than it earns, okay. Now, there's a current deficit of around 2.5%, but they don't want it to exceed beyond 3%. So we're still okay, but we have to monitor this moving forward. Now this one shows you, we're back to train. Okay, so this one shows you the tax on automobiles. The pricier the car, the higher the additional tax should be, which is the blue trend. Okay? That's the original proposal. Pag pamahal yung kotse, dapat palaki na palaki yung tax. But, so, the House of Representatives proposed a different scheme, the green ones, okay? This one, a much lower excise tax, okay, than the original proposal. And the Senate went all the way the opposite way. The pricier the car, if you have a car that is around 10 million pesos in price, okay, they actually want to have a lower excise tax, okay, and that the lower tax increases as the car becomes pricier. Completely the opposite of the blue trend, okay? And guess what prevailed in the end? So there's a compromise between the House of Representatives and the Senate. They settled with a compromises orange line. So there's an increase for the price, the excise tax for cheap vehicles, the ones commonly bought by the middle class. For example, Toyota Vios, mga ganun, yung mga the sedans, okay? There's a higher excise tax. But if your car is between 2 million and 4 million pesos, you will actually have you have to pay a lower excise tax. And then if it's pricier than around 7.5 million, okay, it's also lower, okay? So it's a good time to buy a luxury car. In other words, yeah, if you have $7 million to spare, you have to buy a luxury car right now.
Less revenue for government.
Less revenue for government, yeah. But to the extent, for example, that this one, many people cannot afford luxury cars, then this might result in higher revenues. But this one is, I'm told that this one is the proposal of Senator Recto. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because remember that congressmen and senators also have an interest in it's in their benefit to pay a lower excise tax on luxury cars because they have money, okay, and they want to see a lower excise tax. Okay, so again, going back to build. Okay, so if we spend so much on infrastructure, we must make sure that the external debt, utang panglabas ng Pilipinas, should not be so high. And in fact, it's quite low at 21%. This one shows you the steep increase in the external debt utang ng Pilipinas during the Marcos years. Okay, so similar to Duterte, okay, and actually he drew inspiration from Marcos. Marcos spent so much on infrastructure, but at the expense of our finances as a country. To the point that 1975, around that time, external debt is 20% of GNI. It shot up to about 100% in the next few years. Napababa na natin yan. We've been able to reduce that over time. So for example, interest payments on our debts, again, increased so much and then it decreased over time. But we don't want to repeat this, obviously. Okay? We have to monitor where we're getting the money from, to spend on build. This one shows you the current account deficit, okay, which shows you that after a decade, okay, of current account surpluses, meaning we're lending to the world, we're again a borrower from the world, okay. In simple terms, we're again borrowing from the rest of the world. So we have to monitor this as well. And note that before the Duterte administration, we actually have a current account surplus. We're lending to other countries. This one shows you the reserves, the foreign currency reserves of the Philippines. Because of OFWs, for example, who remit so much of their income back to their families, okay, there's so much foreign currency reserves, okay, in the Philippines. It's been accumulating, but it's been dwindling recently, and in fact, we're down to 7.9 months. In other words, the current stock of dollars, for example, in the Philippines, can only pay for 7.9 months of worth of imports, something like that.
And some of the current account deficit be explained by the Federal Reserve interest rate increase?
In what way?
In the fact that Philippine debt is less competitive now, and so people will now they'll have to look to banks elsewhere to find their financing.
But actually, for example, if because of the interest rate hikes in the U.S., so the tendency for that will affect the Philippine currency market, but with a peso depreciation. Okay, meaning that investors flocking back to the U.S. because they want to invest in places where there's high interest rates. Okay, to be able to do that, they have to have dollars in their hand. Okay, rather than pesos. So they will flood the Philippine market with pesos, and that will result in a lower price of pesos, a decrease in the peso. Okay. So there's so much pesos right now in the Philippines relative to dollars. So that can explain this one. There's a reduction in the dollar stock in the Philippines. Okay, so for build, we also have to watch out for so if we don't have enough tax revenues for build, we have to borrow from other countries. And President Duterte wants to borrow from China in particular.
Our favorite country.
Yeah, our favorite country right now. Okay, so many resources that we want to tap into their surpluses. But notice, you have to take into account the fact that China has been lending to many developing countries of late, okay? And it's part of what's called the Belt and Road Initiative, okay? They're planning to revive the old Silk Road, okay? Going from Europe to the Middle East and then all the way to China. And then at the same time, there's a maritime route, West Philippine Sea, and then the Indian Ocean, and then back up to the Persian Gulf, okay? So they're setting up a lot of infrastructure in a lot of developing countries. But in the process of lending to these countries, to these poor countries, some of these countries are finding themselves in extreme debt. For example, you have Sri Lanka. So this port here was constructed with money from China, but Sri Lanka was unable to pay, okay? So what they did is that they leased this port to China for the next 99 years. Okay? Oo, ganun. Yeah. So that's one. So in other words, so this one is Sri Lankan build, okay, with Chinese funds, okay. But now they don't have total control of this. It's actually controlled by China because they were not able to pay the money they borrowed, okay. So that's one way by which China is entrenching itself in many parts of the world, okay. By lending to poor countries, they know they won't be able to pay, okay? Pero so they won't be able to pay, so they now have leverage to control the natural resources and the assets of strategic assets of these poor countries, Now, some argue that that could be one reason why Duterte has such a weak stance in the West Philippine Sea. Okay? Because, so that could be interpreted as considering our natural resources in the West Philippine Sea as collateral for the loans we're getting from China for build. Okay? So that's one worrying prospect if that's true. Now, as for, again, build, so many projects are in the pipeline, but some government officials are going on to say that, oh, yung mga OFWs, balik na kayo sa Pilipinas, there's so much jobs, okay, we'll get so much jobs, and as long as you're industrious, you work hard, then you won't go hungry in the Philippines, which is just that's simply, I mean, it's an insensitive thing to say, okay, on the one hand, and it's really incompatible with, I mean, OFWs want to improve the lives of their families so much more than not being hungry, okay? So, that's a poor way to entice Filipinos to come back to the Philippines. And on top of that, there's really no assurance that build will provide the jobs for returning OFWs. So I wrote an article to counter that. Okay, so to escape poverty, hard work is not enough. Okay, that's on Raptor, by the way. Okay, as for federalism, okay, they also don't know what they're doing. Okay, there's now a consultative committee tasked by President Duterte to review the 1987 Constitution and assess the readiness of different regions for federalism. They don't know really what they're doing. They're coming up with absurd ways to justify their decisions. For example, they came up with this Rise Up Index, okay, which tries to measure how ready a province is for federalism. Okay, now this one is such a monstrosity of an equation. Okay, it's, I mean, obviously, if you spot it, it tries to copy the formula for the Human Development Index, which is a cube root of 3 sub-indices. But this one is a cube root within a cube root. Okay, it's really a mess. Okay. For example, LI is land index, PI, population index. So they're trying to combine all these indicators to say whether a province is ready for federalism or not. But this is really meaningless, actually. On top of that, President Duterte wants to change the constitution, okay, while he's establishing a federal form of government. So for example, in the last proposal, okay, Duterte can stay in office for another 10 years. Okay? Because in the new constitution, he will be given a maximum of 2 terms, 5 years each. Okay? So as long as he's healthy, then he might actually stay in power for a lot longer. And then there will be no vice president. Okay? The power is shared by the president and the prime minister, the cabinet, parliament, and regional governments. So there's a federal government and regional governments, and the president can nominate or even appoint the prime minister. Sino yun, Sir Ate? Who's that? Who's likely? Sara Duterte, the daughter. Okay? The president can dissolve the Federal Assembly depending on certain conditions, and he can call for new elections. Congress is replaced by Parliament. Each parliamentarian can also serve for as much as 10 years more. For example, if Mocha Usam becomes senator, could she also serve 10 years with President Duterte? And then, the Senate cannot initiate legislation, okay? And can only approve or disapprove legislation by the Federal Assembly. So it removes such important function from the Senate. Instead of deliberating laws with 3 readings, they're limited to 1 reading. Okay? Again, all of these are by shortcuts to the usual checks and balances. Okay? Well, so there will be regional governments who populated by current local government officials. Okay? And there will be no elections in the next 5 to 10 years. Okay? So again, another way by which the current dispensation want to preserve themselves in power for the next 5 to 10 years. There will be a regional equalization fund, meaning poor regions will get money from rich regions. Okay? But the proposal is yet to be held out. Party switching is banned 1 year after an election. So these are massive changes to the political structure of the Philippines, and they will have necessarily massive consequences on the economy as well. Okay? And yet, when you ask people whether they have heard, read, or watched anything about the proposals to change the Constitution, as of March 2018, okay, 49% said yes, 51% said no. They only just knew it then. So majority of Filipinos actually do not know what's happening, okay, what Duterte is cooking up, okay. So at least you would expect that with such massive changes, at least the people know what's happening, but that's not the case. To close, okay, so the main point is really just, again, to give an overview of what's happening with the Philippine economy, how it can affect Filipinos there and abroad. Now, as for OFWs in particular, this one is the event here in Bangkok, okay, last year. President Duterte came, okay. Now you would think that President Duterte really loves OFWs, okay, overseas Filipinos, okay. When you read, when you watch his speeches, his rhetoric, okay, you would expect that he's really doing everything for them. And yet at the same time, you have what's happening in other parts of the world. You have botched policies for OFWs. So for example, if you notice, this is what happened in Kuwait, okay, with some officials of the embassy teaming up with Mocha Uson, okay, to rescue OFWs and snatch them from their employers, even without the coordination with the Kuwaiti government. And that led to the expulsion of the Kuwaiti ambassador, Filipino ambassador to Kuwait, okay, and now he's back in the Philippines. So there, so I mean,
And a lot of
yeah,
Philippine government officials, embassy officials are facing
charges. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I mean, you would think, I mean, does Duterte really look after the welfare of OFWs and the Filipinos overseas, or is it just shallow talk? Kasi, for example, what he's saying is really different from what they are doing. Okay? And the same reasoning goes for the other economic policies. They want to create jobs, they want to increase incomes, and yet they are enacting policies that do the complete opposite. Okay? So at least we should not take, I mean, literally whatever the government says. We have to critically assess everything that they are saying and doing. Okay? Now, on a broader level, okay, I believe that we're not talking about economic issues enough, okay, and that the bad discourse or the lack of it leads to bad economic policy. So we actually, I suggest that we keep talking about these issues, and actually, more than talking, we should be listening to each other as well, because economic issues really strike at the at very basic, I mean, aspects of our lives, and we have to have a good understanding of economic issues, especially to the extent that Duterte is promulgating all these economic issues, economic policies with such large effects. Okay? Sige, that ends it. Thank you.
Thank you, JC. That was indeed a sobering and depressing.
Actually,
Yes.
we were, during our last General Assembly, we were trying to talk about all these issues. So at least now we have
Yeah, now we have it. Thank you, JC. It looks like we cannot go home anytime soon. But anyway, the floor is open to questions when you have some time. And we also have snacks outside. But anyone who wants to discuss, ask anything from JC or just to raise points. No? Perhaps you're hungry, so do help us to join us with there are some snacks outside. You can come back so we can discuss some more and ask JC some questions.
Because I'm just wondering, from these economic policy changes, do you have any statistics that also shows how it impacts the labor migration policy that the current government has, and will it change because of the Duterte's plans to bring back the most of the OFWs in the next 10 years?
I haven't looked at the statistics yet, but I haven't looked at the statistics yet. But for example, when there was again the Kuwait issue, it was really, the government was really encouraging many of the OFWs to come back. And yet, in the news, you also read reports that they're really not taking that seriously. Yeah. On the one hand, they know for a fact that it's really difficult to transplant people from where they are based on their, because people know what they're doing. For example, the decision to migrate, for example, that's not an easy decision to make. So many factors go into that you cannot really expect the government to, you cannot expect people to come back just because the president says so. But I haven't looked at the data yet. I think it's, on the other hand, it's also too early to tell. We have to monitor the statistics. For example, the deployment of OFWs is regularly monitored by the POEA. That is one of the government agencies helping OFWs in particular. We have statistics, but I think it's too early to tell at this point.
It's not really economic related, but I was wondering whether you're familiar with, in terms of the Kuwaiti return migrants, because they are return migrants now, have there been any return integration policies, legislations, or anything like that that's being put forward by Duterte, or anything to compensate the loss of jobs or anything like that?
No. Yeah, in a word, no. Just like the Boracay issue, 36,000 jobs is no joke, and yet there's no contingency plan, no plan to. In fact, they're even grappling with money to give to the displaced workers. They don't know what to give them. What more with OFWs returning from different parts of the world? It's a recurring theme that Duterte is doing all these policies without the benefit of any proper study or contingency plan. So if it's so easy for them to destroy 36,000 jobs in one go, that kind of offsets the intentions. For example, the request for OFWs to come back, how can that be credible if at the same time the government is so not disturbed by destroying 36,000 jobs at home? Okay, so you have to. That's why it's important to keep track of all these issues, because it shows you the many inconsistencies when it comes to their economic policies.
What percentage of import control foreign currency capital do OFWs contribute versus exports?
Well, that's a good question. If you look at the statistics again, where's that? OFWs. OFW remittances are around 28 billion, but in terms of GDP, actually, that just translates to around 20% of GDP. In fact, the share of OFWs in GDP is actually decreasing now. So, in other words, OFWs remittances are not as prominent as a share of the economy compared to way back then. Whereas exports are around more than half of the economy. Yeah, so in terms of relative shares, exports really contribute more dollars to the economy than OFW remittances. And the share of exports is actually increasing, and yet the share of OFW remittances is actually declining. But yeah, I didn't show the data, I wasn't able to get it. But yeah, that's relative importance. Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand what's the real driver of the Philippine economy. First, saying that the economy is growing despite Duterte, and if that's the trend, even the previous administrations, then I suppose how do we hold someone like Duterte politically accountable, even though he's a bad economic manager, the economy is growing?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I showed earlier, economic growth is really robust. Kasi for the longest time, since the Asian financial crisis, we have not seen a shrinking of the economy. The economy keeps on growing, okay? And if you look, there's a way to look at the drivers of this economic growth. There are two ways of doing it. You can look at the expenditure side and the supply side. So the expenditure side, where do Filipinos spend their income? Consumption, investment, government spending, and exports and imports. I have the data as well, but I have to look for it. Pero in recent years, the main driver of the economy has been consumption. Consumption takes up about 2/3 of GDP. That's why the Philippine economy is sometimes called a consumption-driven economy. But in terms of the share of recent growth, actually, the share of investment is increasing. So that's good because the more people are investing, then the more people will reap in the future in terms of, for example, physical investments and human capital investments like education and health. Okay? So that's one way. Another way to look at it is through the supply side. So the economy can be broken down into agriculture, industry, manufacturing, and services. Now, in terms of the supply side, the Philippine economy is a service-oriented economy. Again, more than 2/3 of the economy can be found in services jobs. Okay, agriculture is just around a little more than 10% na lang, whereas industry is about 30%. So the economy, but the share of recent growth in terms of the supply side in recent years has been driven by industry, okay, manufacturing, construction, etc. And that's good again, because industry tends to have higher valued products compared to services and agriculture. So in other words, to sum up, the economy is being driven in recent years by investment on the one hand and also industry on the other. So if we can only maintain that, we can actually do well in the future. But again, it's important to note that that's not because of Duterte. That has been happening for the longest time, and the factors that contributed to that came way before Duterte. So it's wrong to think that the economy right now is booming because of Duterte. Yeah.
I'm trying to answer Don's question. Can we hold Duterte accountable based on how the economy affects poor people now compared to previous administration? Can we actually say that poor people are poorer now than before Duterte, or lower income Filipinos are poorer now than before him, before he came? I mean, I'm trying to answer, because the economy is growing, yes, but do we really feel it, or do majority of the Filipinos, or especially those in the lower income Filipinos, do they feel this development, this growth or not? So, I mean, is it possible to say that more poor people are poorer now than before?
As for the poverty statistics, the main difficulty with poverty statistics is that they are measured every 3 years only. Right now, about 1/5 of the Filipino people are considered poor, and that ratio has been declining over time. But there's a distinction between lower poverty rate and making life harder for the poor right now. Because the main objective of the government should be not just economic growth, but inclusive growth. If you look at the Philippine Development Plan, the overarching development strategy of the Philippines is inclusive growth, meaning growth, there should not be only high growth, but high growth felt by the poor as well. And if you look at the policies implemented by Duterte recently, that does not seem to be the case. As for example, if you look at the war on drugs, that's anti-poor. The poor are so much more likely to be killed in the war on drugs than the rich, even if the rich are also consuming drugs. Okay, so that's one thing. And then if you look at the Boracay shutdown, that's also anti-poor because a majority of the 36,000 jobs destroyed are, for example, service workers in restaurants, okay, waiters, entertainers, etc. Okay, so it also hurt the poor. Train, okay, as we saw earlier, it's also anti-poor because millions of people will see a reduction in their income if they don't receive the cash grants from government. So there are many policies in which can be treated as anti-poor. So that really goes against the overarching goal of promoting inclusive growth. So that's one thing we should not forget. Economic growth per se is good, but we can do even better by making it more inclusive. And right now, we don't see that.
Can we go back to on Thailand, our contribution as a group?
Okay. As a, yeah.
1%, it's a 1% share in Asia.
In Asia, yeah.
And Asia is 18%.
And yes, so yeah. So we multiply that. It's even smaller.
Because that one only pertains to around 80,000 or only 18,000.
I see, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a function of yeah, how many Filipinos are here in.
I mean, compared to Hong Kong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But we're proud to say that we're a bit more active.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this one doesn't say so much. This is not. This is just one aspect of it.
Just a remittance.
Yeah, just a remittance. Yeah, not as your worth as an overseas Filipino. For that.
Yeah, just on the advocacy side, I think the slide on Sri Lanka is really striking for me.
Yeah.
You're working in Rappler media. How do we kind of like unpack those information? Because we have the ingredients right now of Sri Lanka, an authoritarian government. There was also kind of like, in the Philippines, we have this China US push. It's the same thing in Sri Lanka. It's the India and China kind of like tug of war. So I'm just like thinking like how do we kind of like unpack these things, because it's I mean for me like it's really an eye opener that it happened in Sri Lanka. So I think when it comes to congressmen and senators and maybe like normal Filipinos, how do we kind of like let them know that our too much dependence on China could actually present this situation?
Yeah. This is one of the more frustrating aspects of recent events. Kasi this one is not being talked about so much in the media. So that in itself is troubling for such an important. Some people argue that the poor can't really benefit from talking about those issues. I mean, they're more interested, for example, in the price of rice or the prices of jobs, not so much whether the government is pivoting this foreign policy to China. But there are real consequences. Because, for example, if we let this pass, then even now, just look at the photos of the military base of China in the West Philippine Sea. They have full-fledged buildings, they have airports, runways. Yeah, and then there are also pictures of Chinese tourists already coming into those islands. Then, that's one of the consequences of bad economic discourse. We're not talking about economic issues so much. We can very easily go the way Sri Lanka did if we're not vigilant enough. So it's not that easy. It's not that hard to understand na this dependence on China has ramifications when it comes to not just our finances but also foreign policy. Pero it's not just Sri Lanka. In fact, some other countries like Djibouti and Turkmenistan, Pakistan, China has significant investments in those countries as well. And it's also important to note that the investments are not just from the government of China, but also the private sector. Kasi for example, you can also look at the Boracay shutdown as linked to the Belt and Road Initiative. Because Duterte's friendliness with China, private investors are also riding on that. So they're taking on the opportunity to invest in the Philippines intensively. So it's not just the Chinese government that's doing the opportunistic investment. So yeah, that's, I mean, we should improve on that.
Just about the build policy. Because I remember when I was in college, the MRT was still being built, and I had a privilege to interview the Department of Transportation at that time, DOTC. And it was in an agreement about doing it, build, operate, and transfer, which was very specific that, okay, the resources that will be used for doing this infrastructure will be from the, I think from the private sector, and they can operate it at a certain period, which is not more than 10 years, I think. And then it will be transferred back to the government, who will kind of continue the operation. But that gives us the security that this kind of infrastructure projects will remain in the government's hand after a few years. So, but in this kind of build policy, I don't think there is any provision that gives us that kind of security that the government will be given that kind of thing compared to what was done before. So I'm not sure if there's any provision that specifies this kind of agreement.
If you remember, in the previous administration, they actually went on to construct infrastructure projects via public-private partnerships. In fact, there was a public-private PPP center dedicated to all the projects under the PPP scheme. But the Duterte administration actually wants to veer away from that model, okay? And actually venture more into, for example, government-to-government investments. And actually, in the news, Duterte wanted at one point to abolish public bidding in infrastructure projects. And instead, there will be unsolicited offers from the private sector to build these projects. And then competitors are open to contest that through the Swiss challenge. But if there's no challenge, then they can proceed with that. So that's a very disturbing red flag. Kasi on the one hand, you want to remove public building, and on the other, that will be a great opportunity for cronies or friends of the administration to push their own vested interests when it comes to these big projects. So in other words, yung mga kontrata, those contracts will now go to the friends of Duterte. As long as you're in favor with Duterte, you're close with Duterte, then you will secure those big infrastructure projects. Very Marcosian, yeah. Exactly the way Marcos pushed infrastructure in his day. It's the Marcosian playbook that is using. So on the one hand, that's okay because that's predictable, so you know what's going to happen.
So you also have very high external debt.
Oh, yeah, I mean, right now, we don't have that yet, pero that could very well be the case, yeah. If you're not vigilant enough, so we have to be vigilant.
With the OFWs returning and the inflation rate for the poor increasing so rapidly and interest rates so high for consumer credit, and consumer credit expanding exponentially right now, is there any risk of a consumer credit bubble?
Well, yeah, actually, the IMF and the World Bank have already cautioned that the Philippine economy might overheat in the near term, meaning that the economy right now is already growing so fast at around 6 to 7% annually. And then on top of that, you have build, which will introduce so many projects, so many, such large projects that it can also, it will bring growth, but at the same time, it will stoke inflation as well. So on top of, so we haven't seen that right now. Inflation is around 5.3%. That could very well increase if build is on full throttle. So in fact, on Twitter, one of the senators, Senator J.V. Ejercito, challenged me by saying that. So he's one of the proponents of build. And he says that we have to go full throttle with build. And then I told him the exact same thing. I replied to his tweet by saying that it could stoke inflation, so we have to monitor. We have to be cautious about going full throttle with build. But he said,
building so much with the current account deficit.
Oh yeah.
Building based on external debt, it's going to hollow out your foreign currency capital account underneath.
Yeah, and that's exactly the reason why I added these last few graphs right here. So you have the deficit. Okay, if there's build, the deficit could surpass the 3% target. At the same time, it could also increase the external debt. So it's low now, but it could increase in the future. And yeah, as you said, there's a current account deficit. It could even drop precipitously in the next few years.
And with the peso depreciating
Yeah.
on that external debt.
Yeah, because a large component of this current account deficit is the gap between exports and imports. So to the extent that the peso is becoming even weaker, so this could increase. And then on top of that, with the declining foreign exchange reserve, we have to pay for more. I mean, if imports become more expensive, then we have to pay up more dollars. So this one will even decline. So in other words, we could run out of dollars. And on top of that, with build, if you have to import so many things, construction materials, machines, okay, so we have to pay for all those imports, so the import cover will decrease even more. So we have to watch out for the macroeconomic
How did you
things.
do this?
My internet. Well, he replied by, asserting again that we have to go full throttle. So it was I who said we should be wary about going full throttle. But he said you should go full throttle because we need infrastructure investments, the usual justifications. Pero he's immune to all those critiques. And in fact, he even brought up the issue. So someone replied that, isn't this also the strategy used by Marcos? Because he said, yeah, and look at the infrastructure he built. We're still using that now. So he even tried to cover up, to justify that using that argument. Pero I also replied to that by saying that previous studies have already shown that many of those infrastructure projects by Marcos were not actually very productive, and some were outright wasteful. So, for example, the Bataan nuclear power plant, which took us more than 3 decades to pay, has not generated a single kilowatt of energy. Okay, so that's one example of a white elephant that it was really the main objective of that large project was really to benefit one of the cronies of Marcos. Last semester, I was able to teach the economics of martial law in UP. We had about 90 students, and they took us the entire semester to talk about all the economic policies of Marcos. So that's one example of that. So, yeah, we need infrastructure, but we also have to be wary of the quality of the infrastructure, because if it's not going to be productive anyway, and then we spend so much money on it, then what's the use, right?
Just challenge.
Yeah.
No, this is quite different from what you presented now. Because as an academic, and the level of academic freedom in the region is dwindling and is shrinking. I'm just particularly concerned about your freedom of, you said that you conducted a class on economics of martial law. How much freedom do you enjoy in terms of popularizing what you just told us? Because I think more and more Filipino deserve to know about this.
Yeah.
And I'm particularly concerned about your security also at the moment. Give us an idea.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But actually, I talked about this in the previous lecture last week about the economic discourse in the Philippines, and I gave them this example. I happen to have some extra slides they brought with me. So, for example, this one shows you during the 2016 election when Bongbong was candidate for the vice presidency, and then the New York Times ran this article about golden age of the Philippines, for example. During the Marcos time, many people were saying that I think Marcos was the best president, life was easier under Marcos, those were things in the past. So there's really this mythology with the golden years of the Philippine economy under Marcos. And that led me and, well actually this is my boyfriend, Kevin Mandilla, who to write this article, Marcos Years Mark Golden Age of the Philippine Economy, look at the data, okay? And this was shared 71,000 times on Facebook. This one showed different graphs pertaining to the economic history of the Philippines during the Marcos era, which debunked the notion that it was the golden age, okay? And then when President Marcos was buried in the libingan ng mga bayani, heroes burial, there was also a revival of the issues, and then we also ran this article on Rappler. Were it not for Marcos, Filipinos today would have been richer. And you know what? This was the peak of trolling in social media for me. Someone posted, so we explained all these graphs, all this data, all these numerical simulations, and then this one was the response from some of the trolls. So they, so dalawang inudel na bobo, two fools, para may translate two nincompoops, okay, with no knowledge of economic theory, there. So this was the point where we realized that there's really a machinery behind the Marcos propaganda machine to attack anyone who contested the idea that, anything that contested the Marcos regime. This was the first, this is the second, okay? So just another version of it. So there's really a machinery behind this. Two fools, puro sisi kay Marcos, blame everything on Marcos. So there. But this was the peak of it. After this, the trolling was minimized naman. And one thing I realized is that if you actually talk about economic issues with hard data, with analysis, there's not much trolling going on. And one possible reason is that the trolls are not engaging at this level. If, for example, if you compare, for example, these articles with Joe Berlario's Pinoy Ako blog, where she really speaks in the vernacular and speaks in the same tone and language as, for example, Mukha Uson and other propagandists. She really takes a hit on a daily basis. Bullying her for her nose, for her looks, okay? So there. But when it comes to analysis like this, there's not so much trolling. In the one hand, it's good because it serves as a barrier for me. I don't get so much trolling. But on the other hand, it also makes you think that why are they not engaging at this level? So that could indicate that again, there's a gap between there's not much economic knowledge among many Filipinos, or is it a challenge for academics, for example, to reach out to more Filipinos by bringing down the technical jargon and the graphs to a level that the people could understand? So yeah, it's an interesting time to be an economist. Pero as for the trolling, for the trolling, it's not so much not so serious as people think. Yeah.